Everyone, my name's Emma. Today we are talking about the documentary called True Cost. When it comes to choices and decisions, the ones that we make with more intention will help us create the world that we want to live in. So what we talk about here on this channel, how can we make better choices and decisions to take our power back over our own lives and help create a life that we want and a world we want to live in. True Cost chronicles the clothing industry and what happens to our clothing before it ever gets to us and what happens after. Very few people have any idea of where their clothing comes from or the process it has to go through before it even gets to you. Cotton is usually grown in India, and then this cotton is usually sent over to China to be turned into these pieces of clothing. So our clothing has traveled all across the world before it gets to us. And then we are able to buy it for $5 at Forever 21 or H&M, and these stores, or Zara, these stores are all considered fast fashion, meaning that there's a high turnover rate and that there's a constant new demand for more clothing. Very few people understand what we are doing when these pieces of clothing come into our lives and how many lives they are destroying in the process. And a lot of other stores that are online that there's a high turnover rate or they're always on a super sale, they are also part of this fast fashion industry. And the documentary starts off with saying, we express who we are through our clothing. And I want to add to that, who are we saying we are to the world when our clothing is made through the devastation of the lives of so many people across the world? 1 in 6 people are part of the clothing industry, and they live on wages that they cannot survive off of. They're working 14, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to make less than $100 a month. Within the trailer itself, there even shows a protest happening, and it says that they were protesting to be paid $140 a month instead of $100 or the $80 that they're currently being paid because they cannot survive off of it. And then there is 80 billion pieces of clothing made every single year. A great deal of them are just burned and incinerated. So people are having so many clothes that we just don't know what to do with it anymore. Check your own closet. How much clothes do you have? How much do you actually wear? How often do you buy new clothes? How often is there a turnover? And then we'll get into it a little bit later about how we can manage our consumerist lifestyle. But think about it. Now there's 80 billion pieces of clothing made every single year. So that means 80 billion this year, 80 billion last year, 80 billion the year before. And there's 7 billion people on the planet. And there's trillions of pieces of clothing. And now a lot of times when we donate clothes or we throw them into those bins, they get shipped to third world countries, and all of this clothing is just forced onto the local economy. Many locals depend on selling the clothing that they make. But now that this clothing is coming in and it's so cheap, then as well, because nobody wanted it, it is devastating the incomes of those people as well. Their clothing is much greater quality, has respectable people working on them, but because of how much we are just dumping into other lands, they aren't able to have these jobs. So we are destroying their economy even more. And there is over 2,000 chemicals consistently used in the industry that have not been tested for safety. One of the biggest ones that is used is chromium. And in the areas that these people work in these factories, they also live next to these factories. They can't afford to live a mile or 2 miles away. They have to live right next to it. And because of the chemicals used in the clothing, there's a lot of runoff of very toxic chemicals, chromium, mercury, and this clothing is soaked in these chemicals, and there's oftentimes recalls on clothing because of how quickly it's made and turned over and how devastating those chemicals are that they're using in it. And there was a very important moment where the narrator of the documentary turns to and is translating a conversation he's having with a mom who's holding her son, and he basically said she's just waiting for him to die because of the amount of birth defects that kids are being born with in those areas. And the devastation continues. They say if you want to know where modern slavery exists, look at where your clothes were made. A lot of these people are forced into this industry and into almost anything else that we can buy. It is huge industries that people are forced to work 16-hour days with barely making any money, but still being the sole earner in the most families. And the documentary was made after the Rana Plaza collapsed in India, and it was a devastating collapse because 1,000 people were killed. Over 27 huge companies were creating products in these factories, many of them being H&M, Walmart, Target. A lot of these huge companies that we're constantly buying from were making clothes in a factory like this one. A lot of these factories are made quickly without many codes being followed, and these collapses are very common. And the companies refused to pay the families any sort of money for the loss of their family members, and these companies said, we're only going to give you money if you prove that you were related to the person who died through DNA testing. And they can barely afford to pay for food, they can't afford a DNA test, and the ones who did get money got maybe $30. So there is this consistent lack of human rights being looked at in these areas where clothing is created, and we are not aware of it. There has been a big movement since the documentary came out trying to ask companies to prove that they are working on ethical practices and to be transparent with what practices they are conducting in these countries, because they often go to places where there's very little government involvement on the workers' behalf. So, what can we do? Well, since the documentary has been released, quite a few fast fashion companies have gone bankrupt. Their production has stopped. Many people will say to me, well, Emma, these people need a job and I'm providing them a job by buying from these products. And the truth is, if we are not standing up and saying this isn't okay, you need to pay them more, you need to provide acceptable environment to be working in, they will never have a better life. They don't have a good life now, working 16 hours in a factory where they're locked inside. It's very hot in there, and the risk of the building collapsing is constant. So how are we helping them if we aren't standing up and saying we want better for them, if we continue to buy these products? So let's talk a little bit more about why we're buying so much. Now, we are living in a world where Amazon is at the touch of our fingertips. We can buy almost anything without even leaving our house now. And we oftentimes have no idea where these products are coming from. When we buy from Amazon or we buy anything online, we're not told that this is coming from a factory in this place, these workers have no rights. No, that's all hidden behind this curtain that is not telling us what is happening and where our products are coming from. And why are we buying so much? You would think if we were in a consumerist nation and we were buying so much and so often, we would actually be happy because we can afford so many materialistic things. But are we actually happier? America and a lot of these well-advanced countries have the highest rates of depression. And we are doing all of this. We are turning over clothing, items that we have in our homes constantly. We're not even happy. It's not even benefiting us. It's just taking away from almost every living being on the planet by having these materials made. And think about it. When you do buy a piece of clothing or you're buying anything, what agenda are you buying it with? When you're buying clothing, do you expect this piece of clothing to make you happier, to make you love yourself, to make you feel better about yourself? When we accept people into our lives, when we accept items into our life, and have the secondary story that they need to achieve, or this agenda that they need to make real, that they need to come and complete, well, we end up in this constant circle of, well, we need new items because the rush of happiness that you felt is now gone. We buy something and it's really exciting for a few days, and then we leave it, and then we just go back to wearing all the stuff that we always wore because we actually really like it. So we're constantly doing something, consuming at rates that aren't even making us happy. We have access to so much entertainment, and people are still sad because they're expecting this entertainment, this clothing, these items to fill a void inside of them that nothing can fill. It's only inside of you that can be filled. So when you are buying clothes or items or almost anything else, think about the story of it. Where is it coming from? Where is it going after you? And we shouldn't just constantly be buying, even if we are giving it to a place where it will be used, where we know where it's going to end up. We should only be buying items that actually spark this joy. I'll put the Marie Kondo video that I did, where I went through a lot of my own clothes and a lot of stuff that I had, and I would say that now all the stuff that I do have, I like it a great deal, and it is a tool for me to give myself all of the stuff that I was constantly looking for in other places besides myself. So I do encourage buying things that actually help you and you see as a tool to help you create this atmosphere around you that is satisfied and interested and that excites you about the world. Not items that are meant to do that themselves. All of these items that we have are just tools for us to get to a better place within ourselves, not to serve this purpose themselves. And when it comes to that, I do have a great deal of journals and stickers, and they themselves are not made out of the best materials ever. Stickers are made again out of this petroleum, this plastic, so their creation wasn't the greatest, but I have them and I use them on a daily basis. I write a lot, I create with them. And for me, it does spark this joy. But I'm not going out every weekend and buying 100 notebooks every weekend because I think that these new notebooks are going to fill this void. I use them to help me become a fuller person myself. And that is how we should be looking at items. How are they being used as a tool to help create us into this better person, not as these items are making us this better person. They're just a way to help ourselves become that better person. They're not doing the hard work for us. So I will link the documentary below. Hope you watch it. It has very important scenes and stark images inside of it that hopefully will encourage you to look at your life and analyze the different places that you can do better. And the choice is yours. What are you going to do? I hope to see you soon. But until then, I hope you have an amazing